Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to 365 Deep Dive. He's John Moore. I'm Andy Honeycutt. And today we have a really exciting episode lined up for everyone. We are talking MVP Prompt-a-thon. This is going to be a really interactive show. We're really excited for today because we are inviting a special guest all the way from literally the other side of the world from where John and I are. All the way from Australia. Welcome to the show, Kirsty McGrath.
Hi.
Hey.
We are really excited to have you here. This one's been a couple months in the works. Kirsty and I spent a good bit of time having some conversations back in Redmond, Washington, almost on the other side of the country here in the U.S., back in late March at the MVP Summit. And it was all around Copilot. It was around prompting and something called prompt-a-thons, which we're going to actually deep dive into here today. This is an exciting episode because we're talking about more than just prompting. And I'm just going to go ahead and lean into the humor right away. I think that Microsoft likes to put the prompt in front of the horse. And when we talk about Copilot, we talk about AI, the first thing we hear from Microsoft is prompt. You got to get the prompt right. You got to start prompting. You got to start sharing prompts. The thing is, a lot of times we don't know where to prompt. We don't know what to prompt about. And so we're really excited to have Kirsty here because she's got some really interesting and fascinating insights on how organizational change can benefit from Copilot and prompting. But before we dive into all of that fun stuff, I want to give Kirsty an opportunity to introduce herself, tell you a little bit about her. I know her from the Microsoft MVP community, longtime follower. She's done some really awesome work. So I'm going to let Kirsty introduce herself, tell you a little bit about what she does and what she contributes to the larger community.
I don't contribute anything, Andy. No, actually. Look, it's a space that's really big. You know, when we're talking Microsoft 365 and we're talking Microsoft adoption, we're talking change, we're talking comms, we're talking training, we're talking analysis. So that whole end-to-end journey. So, you know, my philosophy of that whole no user left behind, it can be a really big job to kind of go on that journey. And in the community, so I'm now I'm 7 times awarded Microsoft MVP, technically kind of 8 years, because you know when your award comes in can be at the beginning or at the end of a particular year, and I'm up for my 8th award, and it'll be interesting to see where you come around for the next one. You go, I don't think I'll have a problem considering what I do. I suppose there's a lot of information out there. I'm quite famous for my infographic, my Wheel of Fortune infographic. So, all things that are involved, I've been doing that for 9 years and it's like on its 45th iteration, of course, and there's more to come with all of the recent announcements. I have the adoption library as well that I've put out there in regards to Copilot to help people on the journey and sort of simplify things. There's lots of information out there. I mean, like all MVPs, we're out, answering community questions and whatever we can do. But I've been running the adoption user groups now for Australia for over 9 years. So we hold hybrid and I look after it for Sydney. We've got Brisbane and Melbourne's just about to go live. I used to do it in hybrid in person down there, but I haven't had someone to help out. So that's about to go live too. So I've been doing that for quite some time. Yeah.
All right. That's awesome.
So
if you're in the Oceania region, if you're in the Oceania region, definitely look up those user groups and join into those. I've also put Kirsty's bio on the lower third right here and in the chat, so you can connect with her and start following her. I don't know how you would, be following us and not following her already, but if you're not, then join her on all of her links there.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Wheel of Fortune. Can we bring that up on screen for a second, John? I've got it pulled up on my screen.
Oh, yeah.
I want to I have to talk about this for
it's just a super valuable resource. Yeah.
Number one, this is like all encompassing. I see Microsoft 365. I see Power Platform listed there, but you even went further than that. You started subdividing it into various categories. Now, this really takes me back to 2014, the SharePoint wheel that Microsoft released. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of how this started and then kind of lead up to today? And I imagine a ton of work goes into trying to keep this up to date.
It does, considering it's on its 45th iteration. So what had happened was I had, Microsoft had that wheel, ShareGate had a wheel as well, but it didn't go far enough. It kind of just had a few on there and went, and more. And what the challenge for me was, I was going in and I'd be doing training for like change champions or senior executives and workshopping. And it'd be right often at the beginning of the piece where I'm trying to get them up to speed. And a lot of things would be turned off in the environment because they're kind of getting started. It was back in the day where, well, they still don't do sometimes big bang, but they'd have only a few things that they were rolling out at a time. And when I wanted to try and talk about the ecosystem, the challenge was I would bring up my environment, I would bring up their environment, and then I go, there's also more that you can buy, and I was trying to explain it and all the various components to try and help them to understand the ecosystem, because it was such a big ecosystem that I just went, I need to create something that would actually represent, what I'm doing. And I put it in front of an MVP Lorian Strand as to what I'm thinking about. And he just went, oh my Lord, can I blog this? And I went, oh, not before I've done. Hang on a second. I didn't even think about blogging it. So next minute it became my very first blog that I pushed out, over 9 years ago, and it exploded globally. And so it's nicknamed the Wheel of Fortune because Microsoft Brazil actually turned it into a big spinning wheel that they could do competitions, and they printed kit mouse like pads, and I mean back in the day when we used to do mouse pads and things, but they were doing all sorts of things. So it got that sort of moniker, the nickname, and it just stuck. And it's been going on since, and it's phenomenally popular. It's amazing to see it go right around the globe and people joining and watching, and the emails that I get, and full on. Been in the process of converting it also to other languages as well, because I get really asked for different languages. That's a harder one to do.
Yeah.
Now, have you been taking advantage of the language translation features in Microsoft 365 Copilot for some of that?
Yeah, look, it can be challenging. I actually found that in the long run, I do certain parts, but I need someone I want someone to double check it before I put it out there. So I was doing a bit of that, and then because the structure of the wheel, it became a little hard to do. So I reached out to a couple of MVPs that I happen to know in terms of German and French. They're the two that I get asked for an awful lot, and they're the main ones that I get asked for an awful lot. So I've been converting those over. But the hard part for me is it moves so fast that I haven't had a chance to put those ones out before it's had to be updated again, and I feel like I'm harassing my MVPs. So it kind of hasn't gone out there yet, but I will. I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's a constant change, constant churn. What I really like about this concept is it shows the bigger picture. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, but also it's not a new story. If you've been in the Microsoft world for several years, it's, a lot of people, when I've worked with people in the past, like they just focus on like SharePoint's like their stack, or, I want to do everything in Teams and just come teach me about Teams. And what I liked to do back then was like, I want to teach you about Teams, but I'm going to teach you about Teams as part of a Microsoft 365 group and the whole structure. And that's what you're looking at here, is the whole picture and how everything intertwines and works together. It's kind of the same or very similar with this generative AI Copilot path that we're on, because a lot of people, they want to, I feel like we're in the era of, if I could just get like the perfect prompt book, or if I could have like the top 3 prompts, then I could just kind of like, I could stick in that comfort zone and I could just kind of play there for a while. But like, you unlock so much more power whenever you look at, let's not just like, do these magic trick prompts, but let's look at how we can sprinkle Copilot throughout an entire process, or we can go from, using Copilot here and Copilot there, using it in the best place within the wheel to get the most value out of it. And that's kind of where we want to get today, is to talking about not getting like the catch-all magic one prompt to rule them all type of thing, but more looking at Copilot as like an integral part into your processes, and really think about like what you're trying to solve with this new technology. And I think that's just kind of the same path that you've been on, for 10 plus years now with the wheel as well.
Yeah. It's certainly challenging. And the outer wheel, everyone kind of, why did it create the outer wheel for the Viva? It's like, because there's so much in it. And I tried to make sure it wasn't aligning to anything internally, because it's not about aligning. So it kind of throws my head a little bit in terms of lines and things. I'm like, the OCD in me doesn't cope. But I had to make it like that, just make it feel like it wasn't part of it. But that ecosystem is big. And it's not standalone. It's also very interconnected. So when we're taking people on that adoption and change journey, I don't like to just say, I'm going to be talking about, Copilot in Word. And if I say Copilot in Loop, they go, what's Loop? And it's a perfect opportunity to start teaching people those applications and lifting skill sets, because if they don't understand that fundamental architecture, they're going to have some issues and they're not going to get the return on the investment.
When we were initially having some conversations around this, it's because I was presenting a session on Copilot adoption and change management and sharing some ideas that I had been working on. And one of the things that I found, and going full back, history wise, John and I have been in the Microsoft Early Access program with Copilot since August of 2023. We work for large enterprises. And so we've had the opportunity to see what it looks in the large enterprise space. And I think it's a little bit different than the journey that you've kind of undergone. But one of the things that I'm learning as we continue to mature through this life cycle and this deployment is that it's not just about Copilot. It's also change management and also the underlying stack, the underlying technology, Microsoft 365. One of the things that we found as we're rolling this out and deploying it is that we're spending a lot of time also kind of talking about just Microsoft 365 in general. And you mentioned everything's kind of interconnected. There's a lot of change that's happened there over the last few years. For example, applications like Loop are interconnected and woven in through various apps and services. And as you're talking more about Copilot, I think Loop's having a much bigger impact in that space. And that's something that you got to bring to the forefront. But that's also a huge change for a lot of end users. They're used to OneNote or they're used to another note-taking application. And then here comes this thing called Loop, which is more in the modern workplace, but it's not a standalone application as much as it is like a service. So we're finding that even as we're deploying this, we're having to go back and backfill some of the knowledge and some of the user adoption around some of the apps that we might overlook as we're starting to deploy Copilot in the larger environment. And I think that leads back also to something that you mentioned that's been kind of a core tenet in your career, and that's change management. And that's adoption, change management, getting people to understand what's available, the what to use and when, and some of the how-to as well. Can you speak a little bit about some of the kind of change management that you've driven and how it's evolved a little bit, especially as we're getting into what I would call Copilot years, because it seems like that hit pretty hard and Microsoft's all in on it, and it's like we're along for the ride with that.
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest things that I'm seeing is there's a real shift in the SMB space, that smaller business, where they hadn't quite gone to the cloud at this point. And there's been a big lift, everything going over. And it's interesting that I've gone right back to the what is this as an environment. It's that one. I then got a ton of organizations that are doing the whole, we need to get our information into SharePoint and got it in there and get it all correct. So now I'm doing a ton of SharePoint, and it's going into classifications and purview and making sure that people are actually understanding how to use metadata. So there's been all this interesting kind of change that's going on in those two spaces to then put the Copilot over the top. So I'm seeing them jumping straight to Copilot, but then they're not doing those, as you said, those fundamentals across that architecture. They're not using Whiteboard, and they're not using Loop, and they're not using, there's all this technology that they're not using. So there's a training component of which I then coming in, often looking at some of the analytics of, what are people using inside a business, and just go, well, you're not even kind of using blah, 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 blah. You're not working out loud in Teams. So do you know you can use Copilot in a Teams channel? You're not doing this, or, good behavioral practices around Teams meetings even. So there's a lot of that fundamental structure that comes as part of the change piece. But change, I think one of the challenges with the change management component is AI doesn't quite fit into some of our standards when we're looking at Copilot, for example. There's a few things, those pilots of old are really a little bit out. We have to treat it all quite differently. And the other part about Copilot is it's just a button people don't have to push. In fact, some of it are going, it's getting in the way. How do I turn this off? You can look at the forums and it's all off. How do I turn this off? It's in the, it's doing so. I don't want it. And it's just because people aren't being educated. So the change piece is absolutely fundamental now. That training and teaching people these skill sets are just a basis. If we're going to spend money, it's easy to turn on the license. It's not so easy to shift people's behaviors. So we really need to think about it.
Yeah. So
two things I want to add to that. You mentioned, how do I turn it off? I see that a lot on social media. I spend probably an unhealthy amount of time on Reddit. And the main thing I see in the Microsoft forums there is, how do I turn it off? It's in the way. I don't want it. And then you look at the conversation, and it tends to be from the individual user. It tends to be from kind of the small business space. And then the enterprise people chime in, and they're like, how do I use it? They're trying to figure out, like, they're trying to connect it to their purpose. They're trying to figure out, like, how does it fit in the flow of work? So I've seen that that echoed a lot across social media. The other thing, to the second point, is I find that these days I'm spending a lot more time with my business analyst hat on, trying to understand what's your process, like what's your goal, what are you trying to do, and then how can we fit the Microsoft technology into it, and then how can we fit the Copilot technology into it, so that we can see some kind of value on that. So I'm doing a lot more of the business analyst work these days than I feel like I've done, traditionally. Like, and I've done that's been a core tenet of my career for a long time, and it seems like you're doing a lot of the same with what you're doing.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And it isn't a simple environment. There's not necessarily, it'd be nice to say, oh, it's dead easy. But it's not. It's just a fundamental part of what we're actually doing. And when I'm working with organizations at the moment, that 11 by 11 tipping point, I'm not sure if you've actually seen it. There's a white paper that's kind of come out talking about it takes 11 minutes over kind of 11 weeks to feel like you're getting value. So if you're doing a pilot, give it a little longer. Is another thing I would really put in here.
Yeah. And part of getting people to start using and start getting that return on investment, one of the tools that people like to pull out of the toolbox is these prompt-a-thons. And it's kind of a buzzword right now. So I was thinking, if we could start with defining what prompt-a-thons are in our minds, because some people I've seen, they see them as kind of a play off of like a hackathon, right? Can we take a problem and make prompts? Some people see them as like a competition, and they kind of run like a who can come up with the best prompt, and they're kind of building a library. But I'm curious, what your guys' thoughts are around what have you run in your organization or seen people run, and what do you think kind of makes a prompt-a-thon in your mind?
John, I think you're putting the prompt in front of the horse. Like, let's baseline a little bit, because we might have some people here that are not quite familiar with what we're actually talking about. So let's take a step back for just a second. I want to make sure we get a couple of resources out there for anybody who's watching this later or actually watching this live.
Sure.
When we talk about a prompt, we're talking about how we talk to this AI, to Copilot. And so just a baseline on that, the prompt is the things that you can ask it to do in natural language, right? So I'm going to throw a couple of links in the chat window for some people to like go and follow up on. And I know, Kirsty, you've done a lot on this. If you want to kind of give a definition around that, the thing that I always like to say is, when we talk about prompting, the one thing that I see with end users is they don't know what to order because they don't know what's on the menu. And I think that's something to kind of keep in mind. You use the analogy, John, a lot about if you were to ask a 5-year-old to unload the dishwasher, what's going to happen with the dishes? Are they going to end up where they're supposed to, in the cabinet or in the drawer? Or are they going to end up on the counter, on the floor, in the dog crate, on the table? Where are they? So I'm going to throw a couple of resources in the chat window, but let's talk about just high level what the prompt is, and then let's kind of segue into the prompt-a-thon and what that actually means.
Sure.
Okay, so on this piece, we've got a couple of components when it comes to a prompt-a-thon, or even just prompting. We have to think about a prompt from the individual, then the team, and then an organization. So we've sort of got 3 levels. when I get started on something like a prompt-a-thon, I have to start from the individual level of what is a prompt, how do you build a prompt, what does it look like, what's the taxonomy, how to get the most out of using AI like Copilot inside your organization, around licenses or not having a license, or the ecosystem, and kind of getting their head around it. So it sort of starts from there. So that's that master the prompt piece as part of a prompt-a-thon. But a prompt-a-thon is very much around process re-engineering inside for organizations. So I've been running a lot of prompt-a-thons, both for Microsoft as well as being a consultant. I'm then also running them for organizations as well. So they will get me in, and it's kind of basically doing a workshop inside businesses. So there are a couple of different types of prompt-a-thons that you might do to help people on that journey. More often than not, it's starting from they have to have a license. Number one, they need a license, because they're not going to be able to do a lot of the prompting inside the likes of Word or PowerPoint or Excel or Outlook to test a prompt or play or get to know them unless they've got a license. That's the first thing. But a prompt-a-thon is very much a gamification piece on a workshop, where you bring people together and they're put into their core groups when it comes to their personas. So, for example, if I've got a bunch of enterprise clients that are actually enterprise and gov clients coming in, what we might do is, and they're all different organizations, we would group together HR, we'd group together sales, we'd group together marketing, IT people, general managers or execs kind of thing. We'd sort of group these people together, finance and legal, so that what would happen was we will show them how, and then they go away and do and create a process between them as a team, and come up with the best kind of process re-engineering prompts. So it's not even just one prompt, it's a grouping of different prompts to fix a process that they think can be pain. So what's the pain inside a business? We've usually got pain points. And then we've got judges. Each table has got a coach on it. They then present back their prompt to us, and the judges go, I like that one, and we're giving them feedback, and then they get an award at the end. Now, there's a lot of process that, of course, goes around a prompt-a-thon, and there's briefing packs, and there's judge packs, and there's, Microsoft have actually provided as part of running your own prompt-a-thon. It's actually in their kit on the adoption side on how to run it. It's outdated. I don't love it. There's too much. It's even got really old Copilot videos and information in it, and it's got statement in there. The limitation is you. I was like, I beg your pardon. No, it's not actually. There are limitations inside Copilot, and things that you can and can't do. So I've found that people will get a little offended by that, and it kind of needs to sort of come out. But you can go and download it, and I'm happy to kind of show you what's in the kit. And then I can walk you through as well what I do when I run a prompt-a-thon, and that taxonomy and getting people educated. So I've got my whole, I've got a deck here on things that I would drop into the prompt-a-thon. I've kept it separate from the prompt-a-thon, because what you might put in to what I might put in are different. There's a prompt-a-thon in terms of the prompting, mastering of prompting, and then there's a prompt-a-thon when it comes to agents. Or you can do both, prompting and agents. Agents has a bit of prompting kind of in it, but there's one that's a hardcore. You divide out the room, who wants to do agents and who wants to do mastering prompts and process re-engineering that's not to do with agents type things. So you can do it just prompts, both, or agents. So there's kind of three. So I've put those sort of decks in a bit of a kit for you.
Do you want to kind of show us the structure? Do you have like a picture of that, or? Okay.
Yeah. So what I've got the deck if I'm running a deck here, so let me just bring it up. So here is the deck. This is what we would actually put in front of an audience, for example. Let's just get past the kind of beginning. One, we'd have hosts. Might be one, it might be two, depending on, how you want. You want really kind of evangelistic, fun type people to keep a whole room engaged. Now, this is a session that's actually going to run for a period of time, by the way, as well. I'll show you the agenda. Then we get coaches. Now, you might have, in terms of the personas that you might have on each of the tables, maybe you're doing just 4 inside an organization, or maybe you've got 10. The downside can be, do you put a coach on every table that actually understands how to prompt to help people get over the hurdles? Do you have one roaming between two? Do you even have someone at all to help you out in a workshop? Because they might be feeling a bit left alone. So we often try to have a coach for each area. When we get into an agenda, you're looking at least 3/4 of a day, because it is a big day when you go and do it. It's a workshop, ultimately. It's not a short, sharp. I have tried doing, and I have done virtual when it comes to doing online and doing a half day virtual. People kind of don't want to do more than that. You can't do it in a half day. It's too much. And we find that people sometimes aren't quite as engaged in breakout rooms and kind of struggle. In person always works. It just works better. It just works better. So that's kind of a bit of an agenda. In the gamification that I'll be doing and working alongside Microsoft, they've actually got a little passport. So as they do different things, they get stamps. Turns on what it is, they get a bit of
Scavenger
stamp.
hunt.
So gamification. Yeah, scavenger hunt stuff. Absolutely. So then when we're doing different things, if they're engaging, how to actually earn, and we just go kind of stamp through. So a bit of an idea. I talk about the AHA as part of that journey. This is all kind of in the kit. I'm not going to spend time. I talk about the 11 by 11. I talk about the gains and why. A little bit about why you have change management, my wheel. I talk about where it is in the ecosystem, how to actually get in, and the gallery. Then we start on the GCSE. Now, this is where I would be flipping over, because if I'm coming in and I'm working with Microsoft, I present my deck rather than the Microsoft deck. So it's a little bit different in terms of the things that I would actually dive into. And that then gets into some of the taxonomy around it. Now, Microsoft's GCSE, great, easy to remember, a good starting point. But it is a starting point. It's the basics. So for me, it just doesn't go far enough. When I'm working with organizations, it's very light on. You walk through, reiterating your prompts. You walk through a bit of a do and a don't, how you go from, you might do it the first time and you might do it the second time. So I'm going to come to my deck and we'll come back around to it a bit. We give them some rules around what they need to do. Because of course it's a gamification, we send them away onto their tables. It's all kind of layout. Then what are we looking for? We'll often give them an example of what they could actually do. And they then need to fill out a particular scenario template. So everyone gets given the template, they go away, they look at, how much time, what does it look like, and then kind of off we go. And I'm going to show you an output of a winner that is somewhat generic to be able to help you.
I love that. So I like the participation part of it. That was a big thing. I used to teach classes back in the day on Yammer, now Viva Engage, where we had this type of a thing where we had a recipe card. What is the recipe of a good community? And then we had people fill out a card of like, what are your ingredients? What do you want out of your community? It's that same type of thing, right? Where it's like, let's think about what we want to do before we just jump in and do it and kind of get stuck at like a blank prompt window, right? I love that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So we have quite a lot of fun, but they also will really struggle during the sessions because they're not quite getting their head around, or maybe they're not taking it far enough. And the first ones that were being run, where it was using kind of the Microsoft and how to, and in terms of the GCSE and a bit of the, little bit around, how to do a good prompt, they still didn't know what to ask for. Because it's like, it's okay, it's very well and good for them to actually say, here's the GSE, this is what makes a good prompt. But it wasn't going far enough. So when it came to the judging, things were a little light on. We're having to give a lot of feedback, how they could take it further, for example. We had a bit of a survey at the end and on all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that fundamentally, it was okay, but it wasn't a brilliant prompt-a-thon. So when you start to shift it and you want to do a little bit more and you need to spend more time with them, giving those fundamental basics, that's when I start to then go over and we start to look at a good art of the prompt when we're working with the prompting. So you'll see here in kind of my deck, same sort of stuff. I'm going to be going through, what is it, the in, the out. So when I get into the art of the prompt, I start to change a little bit more. And I have talked this through. I'm doing quite a large Microsoft Reactor series at the moment. and I'm going through Copilot in all of the various applications, and I kind of started from the art of the prompt. So I'm not necessarily going to dive into a lot of this. I'll give you, or I can if you wish to. But when we start to talk, I try to get them to the whole, search engine mindset, doing the command, and the struggles that kind of come with doing that command-based. Having that conversation with Copilot, like, ordering coffee. You don't just want a latte, you want a latte and it's a large, and you want, soy milk, and you want it to go and not stay, and so all that sort of thing. I talk about the journey and like the books that I'm old enough, I'm a mama, so I kind of go, how many can you do? Because they don't know how far they can take it. Talking the intern, and I do bring in GCSE. But I go a little bit further in terms of breaking it right out. So I kind of give them a bit more explanation. So I dive down a little bit more, and I go even further. So then I start to go into the taxonomy, because this is what they don't get. And this is where they really struggle. Because if you don't know what to really ask, it's very hard to then come in. Yeah. So if we don't know, what do we ask? What do we get? How do we do it? This then is where we support. So I dive into all of this. I talk about the mega verbs and the fact that there's over 190 action verbs. And I love paraphrase, for example, use it all the time.
Wow.
I go into the business content sources. And these are the sorts of things that you can actually do and ask. More often than not, I could walk my way through everywhere and go / and see you can ask for this. But I do that when I start to get into the demo kind of side of it. So I sort of start to say, you can actually use, a template, for example. But if you're in PowerPoint, you need to open the template first. So they don't know that that's what they need to do. So I talk about that. I talk about the fact that most people don't think about their line of business or their industry or the scenario or their persona, that they've got all these models and concepts and theories and things that they could actually ask for. Does this actually abide by the, pro-sci, theory working along ADCAR? Have I missed anything out? Or give me HR questions that are based on the CAR or the STAR model, which is behavioral based questions. So we all have our industry, but the great part about AI is it's opening up this amazing world to us, but we often don't have the knowledge of a particular industry to apply. And that's where our challenges kind of come in. It's like, that's great, but it's not giving me what I want. So then I go document types. These are just some of the generic. But I also go, if you can go file, new, and you're in Word, for example, all those templates that you could potentially do in terms of new, they're the things that you could actually ask for along the way. I then go into output formats, texts, images, maths, codes, tables, lists, bullet points, social media posts. It could be all sorts of things as an output. The fact that they often don't know what words to use, we got all this amazing, let's go create an image or let's create a video now. But as an industry, it's a massive industry with designers. And so they're still going to have a job because we don't understand, if you're trying to do, this kind of shadowing technique or whatever. But I go, claymation, do you know claymation? The vast proportion of people go, no. And I go, Wallace and Gromit type, stop motion is the video type. And they go, oh, okay. So it's like, you're going to ask Copilot. All I did was ask Copilot these questions. What are the output formats that you can give me in regards to if I'm trying to do some kind of graphic design on your images, for example? Yep. I then start to talk about tones. Microsoft will give you some fairly standards, it might be casual or formal or informal, but there are so many more. I often like enthusiastic and inspirational. Someone was wanting to speak to the tax department and I said, use the word mercy. Had a bit of fun. I talk inclusive modifiers because that really shifts into the personal. It gets a lot more flowery in the way that it actually gives you a response. It kind of goes into the personal side, not just a tone being enthusiastic, yay, but it's a caring tone kind of thing. Personas. all the type of personas. And Microsoft have got a list of all of these kind of roles and personas as part of the gallery. Yeah. So a lot of these you could do. Now, these are often, because I'm really dealing with the corporates, I tend to focus more on the kind of the corporate side more often than not. But I've thrown in there, at the very end, maybe like me and my personal time, I do cake decorating. If anyone's kind of had a look at it, nice. I do a lot of cake decorating. So I said, maybe you're playing at being a chef, or what's your hobby, or what's your in the personal world. Yeah. Experience, age, the things that you could ask for. Going through time ranges and a time range. A lot of people will go, today. And I go, well, why not the last hour? What did you miss in the last hour while you're in the meeting? Because you kind of want to go just a really quick update, for example, or the quarter or the fiscal quarter, or and Australia, our fiscal quarter is from the July to the June, for example. But for other organizations, they have different types of fiscal quarter. So the information that they might have in their organization, and depending on the country or whatever, it's different. So sometimes you might even need to define what that actually looks like by a date range instead, for example. So you can put all those in. Languages, there's like over 100 default languages. And in the English side of things, for quite some time, for example, for Australia, if I asked for Australian English, it would literally go, throw a shrimp on the barbie, mate. And it was like,
patronizing version.
That's it. And it was just like full on our ochre, the real ochre, hardcore Australian. But it wasn't even Australian. It was a US version of Australia, because we don't say shrimp on the barbie. We actually say a prawn on the barbie here in Australia. That was for an advertising campaign in the US. So it was like, but now I can start to say Australian English, but it can handle all the different variants as well. So I tell them those kind of promptings and how they can convert it over, which is what we just talked about in my wheel for a thing. I talk about the languages and the scripting languages and Python, and that they can do that over in Excel. It's embedded as part of the Excel environment. They go, oh, really? I said, yeah. I'll show you that in the demo. Didact and redact. Now, this is one that's not talked about, and it's not talked about enough. And look, there's a ton on this page, and it is small. But when we talk, and it's really important, because what I'm saying is people are using all these different AIs, and they haven't stopped and thought about a didact and redact process of going, hang on a second, you've got personally identifiable information, or is there security sensitive data, or what kind of metadata is in your document when you go and load it up, because you get all this metadata in the back end. You can ask Copilot to do the redaction of this information. And before you go put it anywhere, because there are times when you might need to go out and do something in particular, but what are you doing? Or you got to clean it up to give it, put it on your website, for example. And I've seen it where government organizations have put a form or a template or something on their site with all this information in the back end. And I'm going, what are you doing, guys? One even had, for example, they had all the commenting still in the document. Yep. So I give people examples along the way of what sort of things could you actually do. So each one of these, I walk through a bit of an example and talk about it. Okay. From there, demonstration data. And I love this one because I'm a trainer and I'm doing workshops. And so I'm always building out, can you give me a bit of an idea of the type of document? No, actually, usually be even, I did one recently for a very large, vet syndicate, and I said, I'm talking to the HR department and they've got people that are moving all around Australia. Can you create me an Excel document with these columns? And I wanted like 500 rows, for example. Now, sometimes Copilot will go, I'll only do 100 rows, but you can always ask for more, for example. So sometimes there's limitations, but I generate all of these and I will work on that to do all my demos. And you can do the same thing because it can help you to provide templates, for example, demonstration data, and or build me a template. Yay. Put information in it so that I can then swap it out and go, no, mine would be more like this. Yeah. It's a great
I do that all the time at work too. I say, like, we're not paying by the prompt here. Like, practice with this. do some fake data, you know, don't do it when the stakes are high, do it with something that's like, okay, if it messes up, because that's how you're going to learn, you know?
Yes, that's it. Exactly. So I do this. I do this sort of stuff all the time. And once they start to realize that they could just get something that's a bit more generic, they can start swapping information out on, and they don't have to do the perfect prompt to start with. It makes such a difference, because then they can start to go, can you then, and they'll adjust a particular paragraph to go and look at my data to kind of swap it out. And it at least gets the creative juices flowing for them, and they don't have to start with that blank page. So just give them something. I will regularly say, you know, ask it to give you some feedback on what you've actually done. I'll even do things like, it's really simple. Can you check my grammar and spelling? Yeah, you know, that sort of thing. Asking for more examples, or can you give me, you know, ways to be able to do it? It's a bit like doing that demonstration data. Existing materials as a template of good, which is kind of what we've talked about. I dive right down into this a little bit more. The step-by-step. And this one I use so much, because if I ask for a step-by-step kind of guidance on how to do stuff, because people are asking me all the time, how do I do that in whatever, Power BI? It's like, I'm not sure, but let me just ask a step-by-step with an example. So combinations of these as well. Yeah. Step-by-step with an example. And then I go copy and paste, and here you go. That's how you can do it. And they went, oh, that's perfect. Thanks very much. And then they won the interview because they had to do this, you know. And it was exactly what I did. I was like, I don't know. Hang on a second. She's going, I'm not sure if I'm on the right track, and I've got to get this back soon. So yeah. Then on these ones, so asking then, you know, questions one at a time, you know, these ones are sorts of things. I'll do just a bit of a, you know, zoom in on some of this for you as well, if that makes it a bit easier, because these are all smaller on the screen, little boxes of technology. So the questions one at a time, I do this all the time where, and I show them a prompt around, I need to create a job description, and I'm not sure of all the things that I might actually need in there. I need a bit of a strategy to be able to do it. It's for this type of a role in this type of a area, and I'm the HR manager, and can you give me an idea? Ask those questions one at a time, and it goes, sure, let me ask you all the things that come into a really good, based on a template, a really good job description. And it just goes back forward. And I've been working even with students, like disadvantaged students, in terms of some of these disadvantaged schools from low socioeconomic areas. And I'm helping them with this when it comes to, here's a job that you found online that you want to, you know, work in, for example, and they're using the, you know, the free version of Copilot. And I'll talk about this even to my audience, because they start to think about what they could do in their personal world. Because if they're applying in their personal world, they can often then easily transfer it to their business world in terms of the thought processes. So I, you know, talk about that and how they go, I like that job. And I say, why do you like it? It's because it's fun. And Copilot will talk to them about, that's a great response, but you might want to phrase it a bit like this when you do the interview, for example. Yeah. So it's pretty good at giving you your responses. So this slide that's in the Prompt-a-thon deck, I go a little bit further on it, because I go, there's that good, better, best that Microsoft provides you around GCSE. And there's no real bad prompt. A first try might be that very familiar search-based kind of, you know, scenario where you go, can I get a list of questions for the interview? So, you know, that's kind of this one up the top here. It's not a bad prompt. It's a generic prompt. You're going to get a very generic response to it. So I help them with that. I work through the good, the better, the best, the fact that you'll have a candidate position. So if you're playing with this, but then I say, if you really want an excellent prompt, think about that taxonomy that I've talked about. Include something like a model, like you want the behavioral-based questions based on the STAR model. Or if it was dealing with the students, you'd probably go the CAR model, because it's a lot more basic in the way that it actually works on behavioral-based questions. And knowing the difference is, that's, you might just ask Copilot, for example, you know, what is a really simple model for behavioral-based questions? And then you could turn it into the bigger prompt, or just go back and forward in your 30 and get to that point. So people are always trying to create this perfect prompt, and it's not necessarily what you need to do as a taxonomy.
Thinking about like frameworks and methodologies is a really good tip, where my organization, like we might use ITIL or something like that, but Copilot doesn't inherently know that you use that or that you use AdCar instead of another method. So telling Copilot that information will give you more relevant results back, because you might, get some generic thing back and it's like, well, I can't really use that. But if well, my organization uses this way of, in our industry, so I want you to give it to me in that format. You get a better response. Like with interview question examples, you get a more well-rounded response with the STAR model versus like what it would kind of do just generic, like an all-encompassing paragraph idea. But the STAR would actually break it down into like the situation, the task, the action, and the result that you're looking for, so that you can really ace that interview. That's a great tip.
That's right. And even things like, and give me some hints and tips to be able to support me. Or I also say on the advanced one, for just this particular prompt, I'll also say, and what about actually asking things like, for example, and I've got resumes of my other, other people that are coming in, and can you compare this resume to theirs? Where are their gaps, so that you can maybe ask questions in comparison to the data that sits in this particular folder, or whatever, and you might, as a HR, even then go, I want to build an agent to do that. You want to go next levels? Yeah. So then I kind of take them. This is in the individual. Okay. So we're talking that kind of individual engagement, but anything that's in the individual flows over really well now, because if they got those fundamentals, it flows to the team and it flows to an agent. So I've had so many IT people that come into the prompt-a-thons that I'm doing, they go, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong in the agent.
Yeah, exactly. Like add those components. Like you don't have to use every single, like you don't need to pick something from the menu on every single slide, as helpful as that might be. But if you're building an agent, you could embed those types of answers into the custom instructions, so that your users don't have to provide that detail every time. Right. Yeah.
It's that personalization that you then get. And I mean, every time you get it, it's going to be a different response. So that's kind of my master of prompting. And then I start to dive into prompting best practice. All right. So on the prompting best practice, it's the, keep it, simple, conversational. These are all kind of stock standard sort of things. It's specific and actionable, clarity, being really clear. Don't do vague requests. And I walk through this because I find it's important just to break it down a bit. They go quite overcomplicated, because then what they want to try and do is do all of those things that are in that taxonomy. And as you just said, so that's why I go down this road, because it's like, no, you can keep it simple and build on. Don't forget, you can go back and forward 30 times. It doesn't have to start perfect. If it's something that you're going to use every single day or every single week, you might get your perfect prompt that you then save and have then to do later. But if you've got a really big job and it's a process flow where there's lots of things, one's going to be in Word and one's going to be then over an email, and then you're going to do notes from a meeting, and you got to break it down. You can't say do all of this and this. And the context from a previous interaction. I mean, look, we saw in the Spring Wave just recently that they've announced that it's going to be about getting to know you, and that flowing in. And now in Outlook, you can go and say what kind of tone you want, and how do you want your greetings and things like that in the back end of Outlook. But these are things that at this point we don't assume. The limitations, and clarifying and breaking it down in its steps, and that yes, you can get random responses and AI bias and hallucination sometimes. It didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. So I kind of go, look, if it's doing that, maybe shift your prompt and help them out. And I always try and get them, when we do a prompt-a-thon, more often than not, I will go in and go, I want you to have a prompt that's going to be a process that you do at least, if possible, weekly. That it's going to save you, 30 minutes, an hour, 5 hours a week, that you could do again and again, and if possible, even use for the whole of your team. because then everyone's doing it and everyone's saving 2 hours, and there's 15 people in the team. So we try and build for the bulk when we do a prompt-a-thon wherever possible, instead of the personal that just applies to me. I talk about the be polite. So then I bring in my kitty Kira, gives a bit of personalization. She's such a sweetie. She's a very, very happy little Siberian. They're big, actually. I shouldn't say little, but and Siberians are huge, and they're very known for being very friendly and curious and polite and family. And so I talk about, go be polite, go be curious. I had my daughter's cat who decided he was very curious and decided to go a little higher for a bit of a better vantage point. I say, that iterate, test, fine, tune, and tell them just, you've just got to go back in and keep playing. It's not always perfect. And that takes, a little bit of curiosity. So, and then this one is then kind of with my son. And this is a shirt. He's becoming a commercial pilot. And I bought back from Norway a Viking helmet. And it's just like, make sure that you're not taking the plane down with you. But I say that it's just not autopilot. Driver's seat. You've got to check your facts and review and modify and look for any potential bias, or look for, the hallucinations. Or sometimes I say, don't necessarily ask for things that you don't know at least something about, or that you can check. So there's that whole, sometimes a bit of fine line, or go on the learning curve, but then make sure you know your learning curve before you put your output kind of out there, so you can do a bit of a fact check. And go double check all the links and the reference points and and I show them when we do the demos, but mostly just go have a bit of fun. So that's my next module as part of that workshopping and putting it out there. Yeah. So that's kind of that piece.
There's a lot to unpack in there. That's going to make a really good short. And I'm glad you shared that. I find it really fascinating as we're stepping through that, some of the approaches that you've taken to thinking about how to prompt, how to interact with Copilot. And it kind of parallels a lot of the work that I've done kind of independently. And as we were at MVP Summit, we were sharing some conversations around that. And the thing that really jumped out at me was the verb grid that you had. I remember that one specifically. That one was like, when I'm interacting with these agents, I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to say, clarifying what I'm going to say. And if I don't get the result out of it immediately, I go back and kind of reprompt it and, iterate against that until I start to get the results out of it. But the wordplay, I think, is something that when we were talking, really jumped out at me. So I'm glad you walked us through a lot of that. And there's just a couple of things that I want to step back on and kind of expand on just a little bit. One of the, and this is going back into the wordplay. One of the studies that I've seen recently that validates a lot of what we're talking about here is that English majors tend to do better with prompting.
That's what I was going to say.
Comms managers and English majors and advertising agencies, for example, where it's all wordsmithing. They're doing amazing. They kind of go, I get this, I know. And I often ask, is there anyone with a comms degree in the room? You're going to know what I'm talking about. This is nothing new to you.
I find, though, that for those that are not as skilled in that, Copilot is the perfect companion for that, because I have multiple conversations going at any time. It's not just the main conversation that I'm in. It's the side conversations that I'm having. And it's the ability to, I'm going to have this main conversation going. Let me go over here and ask it something, take the output of that, come back over here and work on it. So I'm always prompting across conversations. It's not just the one that I'm in. There's a certain point where if I just continue that conversation and ask it, you get results that are not as good. The results start to diminish. That's what I'm looking for, diminishing results. So I find that having that kind of sidebar conversation. So to go back to that particular, just the verb grid, if you don't know what to ask it, Copilot's the perfect companion to ask for, how do I say this? Or how do I, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me to get there? So it knows how to, you can talk to it. So ask Copilot for what's a different way that I can ask to get kind of the same goal. What's a synonym that I could use here? What's a better word that I could use to get to the thing that I want. So I wanted to like bring that up. You've done the work to like put that together. That's awesome. I'm glad we were able to see that. But I want to make sure people know that they're empowered to use Copilot as their Copilot, to ask it how to ask for the thing that that they wanted to do. So that one really jumped out at me. And then going back through some of the other techniques, another one that really jumped out at me that I use all the time is the role playing. And I don't think people really understand how powerful that can actually be, not just with Copilot, but just with AI in general. When you ask it to assume a role, it scopes the knowledge down. It helps it to infer the intent that you're looking on, or you're looking for. Like, what are you trying to do? And it really helps it to narrow down its focus to what you're actually trying to accomplish. The cool thing about the role playing is that it's all built into the training already. And so it's just like it's putting on a hat and, it's going to go and perform on the stage for you. It knows like all of that information. The role-playing method, though, that I really like is having it assume multiple roles and play off of itself. I like having, like, I'll prompt it and I'll say, okay, you're going to assume these 3 roles. You're going to be, a marketer. You're going to be, a business analyst, and you're going to be, an end user. And, this is the environment and this is what you're trying to do. The 3 of you are going to have a back and forth conversation, and you're going to try to arrive at, some solution. And by having it kind of assume the 3 roles and go back and forth in the conversation and play off of itself. Another technique you mentioned is like step by step, and answering one question at a time. If you tell it to assume these 3 roles, go step by step, wait for me to respond, and then go to the next question, the results are exponentially better coming out of that. But that's not a single prompt. That's a series of like a conversation that you're actually having. And that's kind of another thing that I want to like really bring out, that I think that you kind of touch base on as you're moving through that. It's not about the single prompt. It's not about the super prompt. I'm not a believer in the super prompt. I think that, it's a fugazi, a uazi, it's fairy dust. I think it's the iteration, whether it's in the single conversation, whether it's multiple roles, whether it's multiple conversations, it's the iteration. And try again, because as we mentioned earlier, you're not limited to like the number of prompts. Like, you can start over, you can start fresh, you can get to a certain point, and you can ask Copilot, let's recap here, make it a prompt, and then I'm going to start over. And you can take that and kind of turn it into a new conversation. So the role playing one really jumped out at me. The iteration jumped out at me. The verbiage, the verb grid, really jumped out at me. And those are some things that like I spend a lot of time iterating against. I just haven't clarified it kind of the way that you did. And when we talked about the MVP summit, like that got me really excited. I started making notes, right? I think like my iPhone, like right then, I was like, I got to go back and like try this stuff later. Like, I'm back in my room, like trying it, and I fell asleep, woke up a couple hours later, and all the lights are still on in the room, and I still got the conversation going. I was like,
I'm so pleased that, I can put you to sleep.
But I was so excited to actually go and like document that. I was like, I've got to go and try some of this stuff. So I've been like iterating against that since I got home. The other thing that you mentioned as you were kind of moving through that I just want to make sure that we bring out and just call attention to is the different techniques, the different ways of like asking for something. So we mentioned SMART as we were moving through it. I was doing some research recently, putting together a Copilot project rollout for my organization. And as I was doing that, I'd come up with like a 4-pillar approach to how I wanted to do this thing. And it was basically like onboarding, discovery, design, and deployment. And that's what I've been like building around for a little while. And doing some research with Copilot recently, I found out that's actually called the double diamond project method. And I was like,
yes. And Microsoft uses that a lot. Microsoft uses that heaps.
And so that made a lot of sense as I was like putting that together. I'm like, I didn't know that was the technical term for it. So now that I know what the technical term is, I went back and iterated against the approach and, the document that I had against it. I'm like, this is a double diamond approach, evaluate what we've done so far, give me some feedback on that, show me some areas of opportunity. And it opened up a whole new world. And so from there, it was like, are there any additional techniques that I should be thinking about? Are there any additional processes that I should be thinking about as I'm looking at like this larger deployment? And it went ahead and put on like its project manager hat. And it's like, well, there's this and there's this and there's this. And like, so you can explore like those different avenues. It extends your capabilities into maybe lanes that you're not as well versed in. And so you can use it as a learning partner. You can use it as that consultant and kind of fill some of that role. And so I'm glad you kind of touched on that as you were moving through it. And I just want to make sure like we bring that to the forefront of the conversation. That's another capability that it has. It extends your capabilities as an end user. And just to tie that back to a study, Ethan Mullick from he's got a blog called One Useful Thing. He's from the Wharton School of Business. He participated in a study with Harvard, and they went and worked with Procter and Gamble, and they released a paper called like the Cybernetic Teammate. And then there was a study of around 800 people that worked at Procter and Gamble, and they did 2x2 studies, what they called it. Recently at the Microsoft 365 conference in Las Vegas, they talked about it as part of like the keynote. And in that 2x2 study, what they found is that an individual powered with Copilot was able to create a solution that was of higher quality with better results than a team of two that were well versed in engineering and in marketing. But then when you took those same two in engineering marketing and you empowered them with AI or Copilot, they were able to exceed even their capabilities with a higher quality of product. So it does allow us to fill in some gaps and to extend what we're able to do as individuals or even in a team. So
yeah, you get a boost from knowing what good looks like and what bad looks like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Although there's never really bad.
But or when it's lying to you, you know, or when it's hallucinating, right? Like being able to pick that out is a skill.
Bad. Yeah, you could probably go bad on that. Yeah, you could go bad on that.
Yeah.
No, I hear it is one of the spaces at the moment that I say Microsoft and the prompt-a-thons I'm doing. I've just come back around. They started doing just kind of mastering prompts, but they've jumped very fast to agents.
Yeah.
Because then that's where all the developer side of it is. There's more money in it for partners. They want to do more around the agents and building and the licensing and the whole lot. But a lot of the IT don't know how to do necessarily a prompt. And IT, it's in the hands often of IT, and they can't do business process re-engineering. So this becomes a real problem. And the downside of doing that is we're not getting businesses across prompting right now. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there talking about good prompts, but they're not then dividing it up between the me, the we, the us. You know, so in terms of
I'm glad you as you were starting that from prompts to agents, that's been on my mind for weeks now. And I think that's the bridge that like we need to think about when we get into getting into agents. Prompting is very much for a lot of users, especially in the Copilot world. When we start with Copilot, it's very much personal productivity. How can I get it to do this particular thing? How can I get it to save me time? And kind of the thing that we've been chasing for a while now is the ROI. How can we benefit from this as an organization? How can we as a small business benefit from this? How can I share what I'm learning? And so like we've gone back and forth. Like John and I have done a show previously, our prompt cookbooks. I use Loop for that. I have a Loop workspace that I maintain, and I have a whole bunch of different prompts in there. I also use an app called Reader, and anytime I see a prompt that's interesting, I save it to Reader, and then I put it in my notes, and then I iterate against it. I play with it. But in the enterprise, how do we share that? And so until Prompt Gallery matured over the last few months, we were copying and pasting. We're putting them in OneNote. We're putting them in Loop or Word or whatever.
SharePoint.
And then there was the Prompt Buddy, the Power App Garage, Microsoft Garage solution that came out. But still, it was very much kind of a personal thing. Somebody develops the prompt, and then they share the prompt. And so now through Prompt Gallery, I can share with teammates, and I can share with a Microsoft 365 group, and I can make that prompt available to other people in the organization. But as agents started to roll out, there was the thought process. What can we do with an agent? And Kirsty, to your point, it was very heavy. Agents, here they are, and it's like an avalanche of agents, and we're like,
everybody
don't even really understand what we can do with them yet. But the thing that crystallized for me, recently, was agents are a way to start getting a more consistent output from prompting. You can run the same prompt 100 times and the results are going to vary each and every time because it's a language model. It's words. And you could ask me what the weather is in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I'm from. Right now, it's kind of overcast and it's in 69 degrees Fahrenheit. You ask me tomorrow, and I'd say it's cloudy and it was in the upper 60s. You ask me a couple of days from now, I was like, it was rainy and it was like mid 60s. That's essentially kind of the same way of saying the same thing, but like you asked me this similar question, and it's the same thing with Copilot. You can give it the same prompt 100 times in a row, and the answer is going to vary a little bit each and every time. But what I've found with agents, because there's a description which defines the role, there's a set of instructions, and then there's kind of the prompt that you give it, it tends to be a little bit more consistent in the output. And I think that's where we start to go from the we, the personal and prompting, to the me, the personal and prompting, to the we, where we can start to use it in a consistent and outputted way. So I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about that. And that's been like something very much top of mind for me for quite a while. It's like, how do we go from the me to the we, where, we've done that in the Microsoft world for a long time, OneDrive to SharePoint and Teams and, business processes. And so now with like getting into agentic AI and instructions and prompting there, it seems like we're looking for more of the we application and then trying to figure out some more of the consistent output so that we can get some kind of similar results. We still have to figure out how it fits into the business process, but I think that's where agents are kind of taking us, is the ability to get a little bit more consistency out of this thing, the prompting that could be wildly different every time you run it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that we kind of us, them, and understanding it. Rishi Nikolai, who is the behavioural specialist for Microsoft, he's actually based here in Australia in Canberra. He's got his modern collaboration architecture framework, the Mocha, and as part of that and running, he's got some really good information around what actually sits. And I've kind of got it here if you want to see it on the screen. Let me just see. I can just maximize if you want to see.
Let me make it bigger.
There you go. So his Mocha framework is then talking about what sits in the individual in terms of technology as well. So he kind of aligns Copilot into this whole sort of an architecture of, what actually sits where, how can you do it, where can you do it? And that kind of helps them to sort of break down a little bit from the individual side, the things that you might actually work on. So when I go into a prompt-a-thon, I then start to go, we shifted a bit away from the personal and to do a bit of an output. So for example, one of the winners on mine, when we did the prompt-a-thon and getting to understand that process re-engineering, because that's really what prompt-a-thons are very much designed around. We will give them the things like some scenarios that have been done before. And that's like the scenario libraries. There's lots of day in the life of and the scenarios for a HR manager. And there's so much in there that you can actually go and download or go research and look at. Yeah. So what we're doing is based on that particular persona. So what I did was I actually presented to them a bit of a one-stop KPI kind of thing that you might only do once in 6 months or once in a year to give them a bit of an idea of, you might not do this, maybe it's even every quarter. You might do this as a one-off, gives you a fabulous result, save you a ton of time, but it's not necessarily something you might do, weekly or monthly. And they actually really loved it though. And I kind of went, yeah. So they took that prompt to the next level and they looked at what does it look like in the process from the past? I need to check in now, and I want to then look forward in terms of getting themselves ready. Let me do a bit of a zoom in on that a bit so we can kind of see it a little better and move up on that. If it will move down a bit on the page for you, there we go, because it's jumping too far. There we go. And so what they did was they kind of extended out as a real time saver. Now it is the one that won. And the reason that it actually won at the time was it was at the end of the year, getting into December, when everyone was up for their performance review. Yeah. And they went, even Microsoft and the judges we're doing that right now. We love that one. So it, of course, won because it was a good just-in-time type prompt. wasn't necessarily the best prompt. And I was providing feedback on all the various kind of prompts, or how could you take it a bit further. But it was great to see it go to the next level as a process. But this was a process for the individual, but you could have a process for a manager or a team, or for HR as a process. So this is that. What does it look like for the individual, to the team, to the, okay, so that's where it kind of go, where do we take it that little bit higher as a particular output? And Microsoft will provide kits. They've actually got the kind of their, Copilot scenario framework. And this one is being done. So there's a couple that are out there, and I brought them in. So this one's actually been done by Rishi. Let me bring it up. So in terms of the framework, based on what you saw on the on mock-up, he has this, that, who am I? What do I want to do? So he's taking the GCSE down the bottom, just that bit further, breaking it out a little bit further in terms of the behaviors and what he wants to see. Then when we start to get in, he goes, and now I want to do some prioritization on that. So they come in, let me just get rid of all the animation. They come in, and then there's the card that they start to fill out, and the pick and the choose and the type, and they work through filling out this scenario, of which they've just done some of these here in Australia and in Canberra. In fact, Beck, who I know from the ATO, who's our taxation office, she was actually there, and she's going to be speaking next Tuesday at my user group, because we're talking prompt-a-thons, and I've got Microsoft coming in, we're talking prompt-a-thons. And so they were actually filling all of this out, and they were doing it based on agents, because that's where Microsoft want to focus on. Yeah. So it's got all that, current process, future steps, what do you want to do, the start stop behaviors, which is, all the sorts of things. So that's one. So there's different ones. So there's the one that I had there, which was very simple, and it was more in the personal. Then this one is getting into the more potentially complex. It's going more into the team and the agent. So it depends on kind of where you want to focus as an output for this content. Then you could be diving into, so the next one, Microsoft have their kind of prompt-a-thon sort of template. And I'll put these in, where, who are you in the department? What are all the different tasks that you do? You might have seen this one. Let me just, is it going to maximize?
Yeah, I did something like this like two and a half years ago, where I kind of mapped out my day in the life, right? And tried to make it, relevant to me. Yeah, and then Microsoft's created a whole library of these for us, which is really helpful.
That's it. And these are the different library things that you could take into a prompt-a-thon. So this is then a template where they're very specific around the people and the unique workers. And when I'm doing scenario-based workshops, it's different. So this is often when I'm doing scenario workshops, not necessarily sometimes in the prompt-a-thon, we kind of do this in the scenario workshops, but it will equate and work over to do that day in the life of, and bring in the scenario, work your way through, and then sort of agent names. So they've got some samples kind of in here of what a project manager might actually do, for example. And I've put this all into the folder that I've got the link. So it's like, what does it look like? All the HR, what do they focus on? And then it goes into the, okay, forward, days in the life of. So there's, effectively, I've got given in the kit there's 3 different types of prompting, depending on how far you want to go, how experienced you are, whether you're doing agents or not, whether you're doing the personal to the me, the me, the we, us, and taking you kind of on that journey as a prompt-a-thon. But there's certainly some challenges when it comes to running a prompt-a-thon.
Yeah.
You bring a ton of people.
There's just a lot of resources too, right? Like there's like how, when, if we can give some advice to people who are wanting to take this and start trying to do it in their organization, maybe not even at scale, but like for them and their friends, just to get better, a little bit with Copilot, it could be overwhelming, right? To kind of look at like, there's so much, what do I pick? What do I not pick? So I think like getting started is a good place if we can, provide like resources there. And then, you've got agents here to go through and talk about the agentic side. Cause if you can't tell, I'm a little bit like worn out by agents. I've got like agent fatigue. I'm like,
Yeah.
everybody wants to talk agents. Everything, is about agents, but like they don't know how to like use it in their personal life, but they're just like trying to jump on, a hashtag bandwagon. But,
Yeah.
it's, as we scale up, it's an important place. You just got to know like where to bring agents in versus talking about like the personal productivity thing, like Andy likes to say, putting the prompt before the horse.
Yeah, it really is, because
putting the agent before the horse.
I think, John, on that is they need to know how far they can go before they go, that's not going to do it. And we need to have then something that's more of a, going into a no code to a low to a more, to fill the gap in a process. So they've got to get through that first part, and they've got to understand how far to push it before they go, it's not quite giving me what I need in knowledge to draw from to then build an agent to bridge the gap. And that's where we're seeing the real challenges at the moment. But this is actually a great impact, though.
Do you think that agents are that people are kind of seeing those as an easy way out now? We're like, oh, if I could just get somebody else to like provide me with an agent, then, again, I won't have to like change my way of thinking and my way of working. Kind of like if I could only have the perfect prompt, then I wouldn't have to like worry about this.
And find it or whatever.
I wonder if that's kind of part of the psychology at play there.
It depends on what agent you're talking about, because you've got the team-based, the individual to team-based, which is your SharePoint agent. Just look at this knowledge and surface it. And you've got it either in the chat site or on a very specific SharePoint. If it's on a very specific SharePoint, it's about the me. Usually it's me, kind of me to the team type thing. So it's like, where is that agent actually sitting and how far does it go will depend on then answering that question. And that's where the challenges then come into play. And from a change perspective, it becomes too big too fast, because you jumping to an agent, they don't know what an agent is. They start using the agent, and if you've just got Copilot chat for most of it and you get to pay based on a consumption basis, you're in trouble, because people really don't know. And it can be also that quick fix to be able to help people because they don't understand. And it can be a really good thing from a change perspective. It can make our life easy. Just go there. All the questions are laid out for you and press a button.
Yeah.
IT. Here's all our IT. It's an agent. It answers everything, and we don't have to spend as much time on the phone. It reduces down costs. Yeah. Great. So they're absolutely fabulous, and they've definitely got their place. And quick fix for some, not for others, but it can be challenging. But this one here, this kind of deck is just, if I've got to brief all my judges and coaches, and so what does an actual, if you're running these events, it's different to if you're attending these events. So we've kind of gone through you're attending and a few other, what we would talk about, but this is the briefing pack.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So we'll start from, I go in, I bring everyone into the room, because I've got a ton of people that I've got to get ready for a workshop, because it's not just a simple process.
Yeah.
What are we actually doing? I mean, this is all just kind of generic sort of thing. I will usually have all of the, where have you got to be? When have you got to be? Here's the address. This is the sort of setup. This is a bit of a look. We are providing catering. It's really important to find food.
Yeah.
You've got a long day. People are going to get very fatigued because you're problem solving for a day, and that's always exhausting. So there's a little hand holding, but it is fun.
Sure.
I talk them through the fact that, they've got the cards and all that kind of thing. Usually so that's how I've ended up with hoodies and T-shirts and things like that. So we actually will go, right, we're going to make sure that everyone that is a coach or a judge or whatever, they can be identified. Like, what does that look? Even if it's just a lanyard, because a lot of times organizations don't have the funding for it. It could be a very specific colored tag or something. Government don't have sometimes money to be putting towards it.
Yeah.
If we're running it, and it could come in as part of the cost. If you're a consultant, for example, you might include it. We will provide for everyone, whatever. And what is that? What do they win? Think about those sorts of things. So I'll come back to that. Then we'll have who's the crew. Now, if you've got both a prompt-a-thon running and an agent side of things running, you've got two teams. So it's
segment them out.
Yeah, bigger, even bigger, doing different things. And what I have found is a lot of times people that are coming into the prompt-a-thon want to go and do the agents. And a lot of times the agents want to kind of dive into the prompt-a-thons. Sometimes you're better off to have them separate. Depends on your audience and who you've got coming in. So just really take that into consideration. But you need someone that's going to take, who's the photographer? Who's going to receive all of the prompts once they've built them, so you can get a big book of prompts at the end to be able to hand out to everyone for the business sort of thing. So you've got someone that's kind of handling all those, or announcements and microphones, and you're all kind of wired up. And technology, we'll come to that one in a minute. It's like all things. The judges, who are they if you've got two different teams? So we put in pictures and who they are and where they're from or whatever that. The agenda, you're going to need a longer day if you've got more, because you've got more people presenting back. Okay. Yeah. Two different things, doing different things. We usually have who are all the confirmed, registrations and coming along. What are the type of groups, and then who's potentially looking after each group in terms of tables, for example. So this is the HR or the whatever, as you break it down based on your personas. So there's nothing on those pages because I just pulled all the confidential, because I had a lot of, often we have client information.
Actual clients, yeah.
Yeah. So we got timing as to what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. It does move pretty fast. For example, for me, and when they get into the actual hack side of things, like how long have they actually got to do the hack, the individuals? So we walk through our different coaches who are going to be on the table. What do we want to try and get them to do? Now, it's very easy, as I'll be walking around the tables, it's very easy for people to go off track in all sorts of conversations where they're trying to instead do, in a prompt, they're trying to do an agent, or an agent is trying to do the prompt. And trying to keep them on track, or they're on a experiment because they've just seen all the things that they could do. Next minute they're playing rather than actually doing what they're supposed to do as part of the prompt-a-thon. It's effectively a hack. It's a hackathon in a lot of respects, but for prompts. So walking them through, and then there's the one for the agents. Now, once they've put it all in, this is for the prompt side of things, but for the hack, they've got to do the demo live with an agent. So everyone has to have a license because they've got to play around with this. So then it's going, the judges, and we come back. Now, on this, I'll just get rid of that now, and I'll talk you through, a couple of other things. So if you want to drop the presentation, it's fine, in terms of the, so what we found is, when you're choosing different locations, for example, you've got a ton of laptops, especially if you're doing agents and the likes, that are going to come up and plug in. If they're emailing you the output of this kind of content, like everyone email it to us, or often I'll have a Microsoft team, and in there's the different channels for all the different personas with all of the documents and the things that they actually there, and they're having conversations, and then we're working inside a team. And if it's virtual, we've got breakout rooms of which they've got their team, and they can work in those, whatever you need.
That's how we've done it. Yeah.
If it depends on what we're doing and where we are, and if it's one organization or if it's a multitude of organizations, because a multitude, there's often a lot of security, and they can't join an external team as such very easily. So be really clear around where they're going to be. Is it you providing it to them? Are you emailing them the pack that they've got to put the information into? Do they get an email link? Is it getting yourself ready on a prompt-a-thon? So there's a lot of logistical side of things in this. So then it's at the end, how do they get you back that if you're not using the likes of a team or doing it elsewhere? So they've got to then email you a link or the actual document so that you can put the big book of prompts together to then bring it up on a screen on one device. If it's not coming onto one device, they're literally walking up with a laptop, and everyone's got to plug in, plug out, plug in, plug out. Yeah. If you're doing an agent, they've got to be able to do an agent that, if it's within the business, it can be then good because it's confidential. But if you're doing a ton of organizations and they're going to plug in, what are they drawing on? And to make sure that they're not doing something with an agent that could have confidential information.
Yeah, that document sources.
Yeah. So we have to be really careful that as part of a prompt-a-thon, we go, if you're creating an agent, another thing that we would say is to be clear around it's something that could be a bit more generic, something you can actually demo, literally physically demo that agent on the screen, because they're going to build an agent in that session. And, whether it be on SharePoint or whether it be a higher learning agent or like the writing agents and things that Microsoft provides, for example, and building off the back of it. So a room that's somewhat modern or easy to plug in and out of, or flip up to the screen, or whatever that happens to look like from a logistical standpoint, because they're usually the biggest challenges we found is often around the tech, as always, in a room, especially if I've got 10 groups, 10 different laptops that could be anywhere from a Mac to a PC, and that cable not working or working. And I'm lucky I've got a laptop bag full of all of the different types of connections trainer that you could possibly have. But it was wasting a lot of time going, okay, that one's not working. Hang on, does this one work? Oh, that one works. Excellent. Yes. And it works for most, but that one, okay, let's try. So you be really clear around what you're trying to do in a prompt-a-thon. If you're doing it and you don't have a ton of coaches, say you've only got literally kind of 2 people in the room, a host, someone taking photos, doing different things, it's a little harder because then you're roaming and you can get caught on tables and people can be kind of stuck. And they have to be a little patient, or you have to be very specific and clear up front, spend more time being really clear to go, and now I'm roaming. But more often than not, we have more people in the room. Another cool thing that we did was a photo booth. So we did the whole photo booth with little Copilot signs and hats and mustaches and things, and they could, jump in, and it would take 3 photos kind of in a row, and you could kind of grab different things and count down. And so we're having all sorts of fun, and then they received their kind of prizes at the end, which was hoodies, and actually here we go, boxes of stuff and stickers. Let me grab a few things out for you out of the box. I pulled it out. So there was like Copilot notebook with a pen. There was like 2 different lots of stickers, which I think I brought over to the US with me, and I might have handed a few out when I was there. There's all these stickers. They had like screen cleaners.
Nice.
They had T-shirts, they had hoodies, and another pen off the back of it, bits and pieces. And these were like the photos off the photo booth.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was a fun day. There was a bit that went into it, a bit of organization. The logistics do, she's got it.
The wheel.
My stickers, I thank you. It's also on the back of my phone. I've got it on the back of my phone. It's on the front of my phone.
Yeah, swag always helps with getting, attendance up. Yeah,
swag, but we can't always afford these things. So have a think about what could you do that's more intrinsic. It could be recognition from CEOs and photos and a write-up and a blog and the fact that they have food and they're helping the business, and you could be talking about them being champs, and you name it. There's other things that you could do that's not a financial reward. So it depends on your organization, because Gov can't do a lot of that. So you have to be, careful what you're doing. But that's just a bit of a, exactly when you've got a lot of people, and really the more people you've got, sometimes the better it can be, but it's a bigger thing to run. On a table, you really don't want much more than around about 8 people, but I've been on plenty when it's kind of 10, 12 is too much, because they've got to collaborate together and actually come up with a solution.
You'll have some people kind of shrink back and not contribute. Yeah,
too much. So the smaller, like I find that when it's sort of 5 to max 8, and that's not including a coach, by the way, you get some really good results. HR come together. It's kind of 5 people in the team, and they're down and going, this is what we got. It's a pain. Because pain is time, and time is money. It's as simple as that. So I say to them, what's a pain point? What drives you crazy? What's something you have to do every day or week? And we then kind of, walk our way through it. But yeah.
So a couple of things. So like, I just want to maybe dive into a little bit deeper while we're talking about this. The one thing that jumps out at me is the criteria for help and scaling resources while you're doing this, and then judging, the results, and crowning the winner and the outcome. As you're talking about this, the one thing that I can't help but think about is agents. As we were kind of talking about agents. One of the ways that I started learning about agents was I created an agent. I literally went and got all of the Microsoft content that I could find on agents, PowerPoints, the blog posts, converted them to PDF, went to learn.microsoft.com, downloaded those PDF, took all of that and dropped it into an agent. And then told it, you're an expert on M365 Copilot agents, and I'm going to use you to ask questions, and you're going to help me learn about agents. So I created an agent to learn about agents.
It's very meta. Yeah.
Very meta. But it was a great resource to put everything in one place, to be able to just ask questions and have it act as like my tutor, essentially. So that being said, like when you're doing the prompt-a-thons, have you given any thought to giving a helper agent to like the various teams, so that they could ask questions, like maybe pre-populating it with some of the resources that we've talked about here, like what makes a good prompt, or like the learning modules from Microsoft for like prompt engineering? Have you thought about like creating an agent to provide to the teams of 8, so that they
maybe
can,
just to the coaches,
like, ask questions and as a helper to scale?
Potentially, for yourself, if you're inside one organization, for example, and then being able to draw on an agent. However, when I've got 20 or 30 organizations in a room and I'm running a prompt-a-thon, that's out the window. You couldn't do something like
you can't get access to it.
Yeah. So you have to really consider the scenario that you're actually in, because if I literally can have at least 20 organizations in a room, things start to really shift and change. So what are you doing? Are you inside your organization and you're running a prompt-a-thon, and it's for your teams of people? If you've identified who your change champions are, you've identified some of the senior leaders that have to actually help or manage or look after this, and they're the type of people that you want, those core people in the room, and at least enough variety across different departments to help them to process re-engineer. You could then do whatever it is you like. Those suggestions are fabulous. Love it. I haven't taken it that far. But that's mainly because more often than not, as an external party, I'm not in a position when I'm coming in to run that day. I'm not embedded enough inside an organization to build as a consultant something Copilot. I could suggest it, but then I'd still end up, they'd have to give me, logins and licenses and all sorts of stuff to do it, and they're not going to do that when we're running just a one-day prompt-a-thon for them as a bit of a takeout. I mean, I might do a whole heap afterwards if I'm doing a full change program for them and I'm going to be going 6 months or a year. Yeah, cool, let's start.
You already might be a V- type of person.
Yeah, that's it. But as a rule, I don't have that luxury when I'm running these prompt-a-thons. Having run so many and workshops now, and a ton of different workshops, I often find that it's good if as part of it, even though to be very clear it's in a particular event, I can guarantee you as you're going through things, people start throwing their hands in the air going, yeah, but I tried to do a template and it's, or I've tried to, so sometimes helping them, and I do a demo as well. I do a demo across the different applications. I generally just do the core, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Outlook, and Teams. I do a really short, usually, and chat, of course, work and web. So effectively you've got 7 sort of demos, of which I'll do maybe 2 exercises, and I have a very short period of time to do that in. So it's a hard and fast kind of demo.
That could be half a day right there. Yeah. With all the questions.
Then the questions then start to go, well, and so with a workshop, it's like, what does that look like? And if you're not doing it, then I usually will say, I'll be walking around. Please feel free to ask me, because I'm doing the demo, ask me about anything you like as I'm walking around. And if they do ask me, they get a stamp in the book. I don't tell them, but they kind of go, they've been thinking about it, because for them, that's kind of their aha moments where they're going, but what about, but if all they're doing is complaining, they're not going to get a stamp in the book. It's like, but sometimes it's, can I do this action where it'll move all things in my mailbox? A while ago, it was no. Now it's yes. So yeah.
So another thing, kind of on the same lines, and I'm going to go back to the helper piece, the agent. I'm glad you kind of or provided some insight into the different mindsets that we have to take there. So if we have a mixed audience, it's really hard to do. But if we're internal within an organization, then it might make sense to think about an agentic approach for a helper to kind of help us scale as we're actually doing this.
Well, and one thing you got to think about, Andy, is like in a larger enterprise, you know, if people are watching that are from larger enterprises, you do your first like 1, 2, by your third prompt-a-thon, you're probably going to be good at it enough that you're going to have people beating down your door to do more and more and more.
Yeah.
And you're going to end up like that type of thing. If you're internal, that helps you scale to be able to do it, you know, and have consistency.
Yeah. Because thinking about all of this,
I could foresee like
and scalability. How can I?
Yeah, I could see weekly you'd have to do this
repeatable, and then how can I scale it? And then how can I take lessons learned? This is what we did in first Prompt-a-thon 1. What can we build on in Prompt-a-thon 2? I think of it in the terms of standing on the shoulders of giants. I want to continue to build and iterate, like, you know, each time we go through it. So scalability and framework is very much top of mind as I'm thinking as we're going through this.
I've just put into chat for you.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 surveys. So but exactly on that. So one of the surveys is the feedback form at the end of the Prompt-a-thon. Now that is a duplicate, so it's a copy that everyone can actually have. So it's a form that we'll run at the end in terms of their feedback and how did they like it. So what did we do right? You know, what did we do that we could improve on? So that's number 1. Yeah. And so, you know, that hopefully will help a few people along the way. The other survey that I've actually got in here, what I will regularly do, and I'm going to give you the copy link, but I'm going to, if you just share my screen again. So I'm just going to go down the end, into my presentation here. So if it's at the very beginning of the Prompt-a-thon, so say, for example, I'm up at the very beginning and just before I go into the kind of the art of the prompt, I would go and drop in. I love that
slide, by the way.
Sorry, this one. I know it's great, isn't it, Matt? So I will go into forms, and in my PowerPoint, I will actually drop in the second link that I gave you just then. I will go in getting started. So I'll drop it into my presentation, for example, and I go, you know, present for an interactive meeting. And in the session as part of the Prompt-a-thon, and even Microsoft were going, I didn't realize you could do that. And then they would go through and actually fill out, you know, a bit of fun. What's the average time that you think you can say? What comes first to mind, for example? Tasks that you would love it to be able to do to make effortless. It's then an agent, because this was both the prompting and the agent one. So, you know, what do you think it would be doing here? If it had a personality, and then how familiar, you know, what excites you about Gen AI in terms of that agent side, confident, how confident are you? What phase are you kind of in terms of your feelings? So what we do is we get a bit of an idea of the sentiment of the room first before we kind of dive in. Because if I've got a lot of people here that are really quite, you know, a bit overwhelmed or very skeptical, and I put in the very last one, I went, Skynet Judgment Day begins. And I finished on that. And the reason I finish on that one, and I've done that very deliberately, is because it's twofold when I'm running a Prompt-a-thon. Things like people feel like they're cheating, number one. So as a change person, I talk about, you know, that, you know, feeling like they might be cheating by using an agent. And as I've said in my blog recently on LinkedIn, of the top 10 things that I'm saying that are real challenges and issues is that cheating, that, you know, it should be me doing the work and not AI doing the work. And I'm going, yeah, but do you take a bike or a you know, car to work? And they go, yes. And I said, well, that's more efficient, isn't it? Why aren't you walking every single day? And I was like, you know, it's about doing something that's going to help you around those kind of times and things like those. So, you know, it's about that higher quality work or output, or, you know, you might want to do it for exercise and walk. But if it's an hour and a half walk, you're probably not going to do it. So
I've also heard fear that people are a little bit hesitant to admit how much they're using AI because they don't want their boss to pile more onto their plate either, you know? And it's like, oh, if they think that like I'm so much more efficient, then I'll just get more buried, you know?
Yep. The other thing off the back of it is, and exactly that, it's even things like for an individual that might be a little nervous. And okay, I'll come back to that nervous one just a second. So the other one off the Judgment Day is, everyone has this natural fear that's kind of coming in. A lot are excited and playing, but there's the vast proportion have real fear around AI. One, the ethics. Two, what it's doing, the bias, in education, all sorts of things. Not only that, but movies are full of AI taking over the world. In fact, Mission Impossible right now is all about AI is going to blow up the whole world with nuclear bombs, basically. So there's this, we've been doing it in movies that, for example, it's not necessarily always a great thing. So we have to kind of address that still as part of even, workshopping and process. And then there's that other side of the nervousness when we're looking at the individual that struggles. The accessibility side of this, amazing in terms of being able to help people. Because I get people go, I'm turning it off because it's going to do this. And I go, yeah, but hang on, you've got a lot of neurodiverse, especially in this particular organization I was working with recently. I said it's going to help them in Teams meeting to be able to focus and concentrate, so they're not desperately trying to take notes and actions, and the neurodiverse often won't cope with so much that's actually going on at the same time. So when we're talking about it, or they're very nervous to ask, they're newbies, they're a grad, they don't necessarily want to ask the manager. So they don't want to make it feel like they are got sometimes big gaps in their knowledge. Even senior leaders who don't want to ask someone else. They might have a mentor, but they can't get a hold of the mentor, and they don't want to ask someone else on the team because it might make them feel like they're incompetent, for example. It gives them opportunities. So trying to help people on if I'm seeing quite a bit on the bit of everyone's kind of going Judgment Day, or they kind of go, anyone feel like it's a bit Judgment Day, even though you didn't respond, you probably chose the other one. There's still a ton of people in the room that do this. So that's why I put something like that in. And I think it's important to address the elephant in the room. And if they do ask about going into the ethical AI, I then talk about the ethical AI council to set up within an organization. Microsoft have got their content, setting up an ethical council. They'd start to talk about things like the draw on potentially the water and storage and all sorts of stuff. Microsoft have got a ton of content of how they're actually working on being a lot more green in that space, and how we can provide them with those kind of responses as well. So the elephant in the room, and you're doing a workshop, if it's going to be asked, have something on standby. It could even be potentially hidden slides if you want to address it for your business of what that looks like. I haven't got it in here, but there are things, it doesn't always come up, but it does come up. And if you get someone in the room and you're dealing with an organization, and I have dealt with organizations that are very much environmental type, as in Gov and a few others, they are going to ask. So be prepared.
Yeah, that's a super good resource, and I put the link to both of those forums, like both this one and the feedback, how we gathered lessons learned, in the YouTube comments and the LinkedIn comments for people who are watching. Go check those out for sure. They're too long to show on screen because forum URLs are huge.
Yeah, they are. They are. Yeah. The other component, and we did talk about where is it? Because when I'm doing demos, I have to untangle it for them.
Yeah.
And there's so much confusion. There's so many of the workshops, and they don't understand Copilot chat to Microsoft 365 Copilot, and just helping them with the right words when they're doing even all their communications, because I'll be involved on comms teams and things like that, and to be really clear and articulating exactly what it is or what it looks like. So I help them around, where are all the locations? Because some won't have it on the laptop with an app. They've got it shut down as part of their standard operating environment. Their SOE is like, nope, it's all been removed. Yeah. So these things come in and out, and knowing you can do kind of the mobile phone as well. I then will touch on the free. You've got all the free. Go be free, or you can do your license in the consumer world. So I say, if it's in this peachy color, then you're probably using the wrong one. Don't put your corporate information into here.
Yeah, I'm glad that they've made it so different looking than a year and a half ago when they looked very similar. And you were just looking for a little green shield. Now it's pretty different. Yeah.
So yeah, I started to kind of go into, some of this as that functionality, because I'm saying, okay, guys, you need to understand some of the differences between, and if you get a license, what that does, and you can go do deep think. Mind you, deep think in this is awesome. It works really well, and we kind of have some in the corporate, but not as good really as this right at the moment. Anyway, so in terms of the deep thing, I then go, you don't have a license, but you have a Microsoft license effectively. So it gives you everyone gets chat, and not everyone gets a free car, basically. So I help them around even the limits, because people kind of go, but what can I do in chat? So it's like, if all you've got is chat, and if I'm doing a prompt-a-thon, we're not doing just chat. But I have to do a ton of workshops, and I've got someone in the room who does just have chat, and I then go, this is all you're going to be able to do. Yeah. So I have to be really clear. You should have had a license. You might want to look over the shoulder of the person beside you and do that. So then it's that diving into work and web and the walking through the prompt gallery and the scenarios to help them if they want to go try and find someone. So I do go through all of that, and we talked about all that, so I won't spend any time kind of on that piece. But
that's a good thing to bring through, like the briefing too, for the organizations that are coming in, like, hey, make sure that you have these requirements. That way everybody is on an equal playing field, right?
Yeah.
They don't show up committing a whole day and like, well, they don't have the right version, when they go there. So,
so 45 minutes to go through, a lot of what I've, talked about here and doing demos is not enough often to get people ready for really good workshopping, is what I found. It was, look, it got them to a certain point. They were great. Depends on how far you're going. The more we gave them a little bit at the beginning without doing training as such. So you've got that fine line between, doing a workshop and doing training. And it is a bit of a fine line,
Yeah, it's like you don't, with a certain group of people, you might end up with more questions than getting to the actual hands-on portion, and so do you ever like try to split out people you're working with? Like you guys are level 100, the level 200 is the prompt-a-thon, kind of structuring or scoping out, like who's gonna go into which version here, so that they're not totally overwhelmed.
More often not, it's easier to usually do this is what prompting looks like as do your lesson. Spend 2 hours with them teaching a bit of clicking around, and then do a prompt-a-thon for process re-engineering on team and business, and break it out if you really can. It doesn't happen that way a lot of the time. So it's what can we do in 45 minutes? And then I just hack and slash this hardcore and just go, what are the really core things to kind of get over the line and simplify it right down, which we'll see in the pack that I've got in there. It's like hacked it, and it doesn't go into a lot of that. It keeps it really high level, and I hack it right back. I've got 45 minutes. I've got to do some demos, blah, 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 and punch out. Sometimes what they'll do is, I've got so much content, like even this, it's like, give away everything that I do as a consultant. Let's do that, shall we? It's like, who needs to earn money running these myself? Just go watch online. So sometimes I'll say, go watch this. And then I will, it's why we're MVPs. It's why we do what we do. But
there's always more content. There's always like, we can go deeper into this little thing. That's what John and I do this show. Like there's always something that we can go deeper into, and like we'll do this and we'll get an idea. And like, oh man, we should do that in a follow-up episode. But we've already got 5 episodes like lined up.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. And like on this, even what I've done even last week, I've put a whole heap more in just even this week, going, hang on a second, they haven't been quite getting this. What could I actually do to help them out? And then I ran it, 2 days ago, and went, bingo, they got it. I didn't have that problem moving forward. So you're always iterating and changing it, or swapping out, or you go, that's too long, I need to shorten that. I'm spending too much time on it, and it's not necessary. And so, or you go, this has now come up, and there's something new in the world, and it's just blown that, like, blown it. Notebooks.
Yeah.
So,
like a wave to spring update.
Back workshops yesterday, and as I was finishing up a long form onboarding workshop, I was doing a demo, and then I had to go into another session immediately after that. And as I got into the other session, the first set of questions that they asked, I was like, oh, I just did a demo on this. I'm just going to do the same demo again. And I did the same demo, and immediately you could see like the whole narrative for like that second session actually changed. And I was like, oh, maybe I should lead with this, like moving forward, like, cause I've got everybody's attention and it's hands-on, and like, so it kind of changed the approach. And then I was doing some more follow-up research at, last night as I was getting ready for bed. And I came across a couple of research papers that actually validated that. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And so now I'm like thinking like, I might have to like reapproach how I'm doing this one workshop based off of the ending that segued into another workshop.
Yeah. And it's important, and building it out and the structure. I've put it all in there. It's all in the folder and the links that I've been providing. There's a judge's sheet in there as well in terms of all of the various areas that you can. I put all that in there too, in terms of how I actually run and do sort of prompt-a-thons. You can go download Microsoft kits. It's got some really good stuff in the kit, things that are a bit ordinary you might actually, or old, that you might actually pull out or swap or change and build your own if you wanted to off the back of it. Surveys and information. There's lots of information in throughout the presentation. So the link that I've given to my presentation, it's just a read-only version, not a downloadable version, with all of my taxonomy. Feel free to rebuild your own. But that's a little bit more. I'm trying to kind of not handing that one over.
This was incredible. Yeah.
And we've had your socials up like the whole time. We'll make sure that we link to that. This has been like huge. I got so much out of this. This is exactly what like I wanted to dive into. I'm so glad you agreed to come on and like share all of your learnings with us, and your kit and everything. We're going to make sure we post to social media so everybody can reach out and thank you personally for all the content that you share. I know I would like to follow up with you. There's a few other things we talked about here today that we didn't have time to like really deep dive into. I've got so many.
Oh, we got another 2 hours, don't we?
Right.
No, actually, I've got a huge weekend of work. I'm really not looking forward to it. But anyway.
You mentioned that you're doing an event next week. Do you want to drop a link for that and we can share that?
Sure.
Okay. Or anything else that, speaking engagements that you're going to be doing that you want to share, we can help amplify. We'd love to.
Here we go. I've got, so my user group is on Tuesday. It's generally late in the afternoon, so it might be a little late for you guys, but the recording always goes on to my YouTube, which is all part of that kind of bio to watch it afterwards.
Is that M365 adoption?
That's my Microsoft 365 adoption. Yeah, my M365 adoption, aka.ms/M365 adoption, leads you to my YouTube channel. The bit.ly link that I've just supplying now is to the June user group, where I've actually got Microsoft and clients, and we've got client cases, and we're talking about our prompt-a-thons, very similar to kind of what we're doing here now, but alongside Microsoft and clients. So we're actually going to be doing that next Tuesday. So that's actually going to be coming up very soon. The Microsoft Reactor. So let me bring up, so I've got a playlist. So Microsoft Reactor, and that we've actually been doing all of the webinars, that I've got a whole, productivity series across all of them. This should then be the link for the, if you go to the Microsoft Reactor on YouTube, it's a whole playlist. You go to the playlist, it's a new one. It's just called Copilot Corner. So I've been running the Copilot Corner series. So there's 5, I think, that's now gone live from Chat Teams, Outlook, Word, and untangling the Copilot and prompting. Yeah. So they're the 3, 4, 5, I should say. There's a whole heap more to come. There's 11 in the series all up.
Awesome. Very cool. And those are in the chat in both places. Also on the screen, you can pause it if you're watching later on and type that URL in. Good luck.
It should be in the YouTube comments, and it should be in the LinkedIn comments if you're watching this live. You don't have to, you should be able to grab all of these in the comments. I've been furiously copying and pasting and posting across the various channels as we've been moving through this.
Yeah. As Andy said, this is incredible. Just wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have, and for everything that you do in the community. Yeah, I think that pretty much rounds it out. This was a full 2 hours, of just a
Thank you
wealth
for
of
having
knowledge
me,
from
guys.
Kirsty.
Well,
Yeah.
no, thank you for being here. This is
Yeah,
exactly
Saturday
what I
morning
was
for you.
hoping that we could share with everybody that joins us and like watches on repeat. We've got some great shorts. John and I are going to get to editing and posting that. We'll follow up with you, make sure we get that for your channels as well. But this is exactly what I was hoping that we were going to be able to discuss and really dive into. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us.
You're very welcome, guys, and you know where I am if you need me.
Awesome. And everybody,
to help you out.
yeah. And everybody, thank you for watching and sticking with us. We will be back, I think, to our normal time next month in the mid to late June timeframe. And we will see you guys in the next 365 deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
The Aussie time zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take it decent.
Bye, all.
Bye.